One barrier to credentials is a lack of access to opportunities in the first place. And one population that often suffers from this is incarcerated Americans. Dr. Monique Ositelu with New America looked at federal and state prisons to determine whether training is available behind bars and whether those programs help folks succeed in the labor market. So Monique, let me turn to you.
Hello, thank you so much, and thanks for that introduction, Gabe. So for the past year and a half, I have done a deep dive analysis and looking at some national representative data on adults in U.S. federal and state prisons, as well as looking at different prisons across the country, where I've had the opportunity to speak with over 200 individuals directly impacted by correctional post-secondary education and job training programs. And in my collective of research, I've discovered about 9 in 10 adults in U.S. federal and state prisons will be released, with over half expecting to be released within the next 2 years. And so with an overwhelming majority of adults returning back to the communities, about 70% of the population want to enroll in a college, getting a job post-release. However, although research has shown that post-secondary education is meaningful to both re-entry and as well as to labor market success, many U.S. correctional facilities have actually moved away from providing post-secondary educational opportunities to those who are incarcerated. And so ultimately, the reality is that the success rate for re-entry is relatively low, which kind of fed me to want to do my research to identify effective correctional rehabilitative programs to help these individuals get these credentials and also help them with labor market preparation. So I evaluated the literacy and numeracy skills of incarcerated population, and I compared that with the general public. And what I found was that on average, incarcerated population tend to be less proficient in these skills compared to the general public. However, when these individuals actually complete a post-secondary credential and or job training while serving time in prison, this gap in skills is actually reduced and it's eliminated. And so regardless of race, gender, age, or even how much time you have left to serve, completing a credential time actually. So what can we do to allow these individuals to have access to these critical credentials? First and foremost, the reentry process must happen early on. It must happen, and it must prioritize higher education as well as job training. Secondly, as Gabe mentioned, we are in a global pandemic that is having economic impacts, and a lot of times that calls for budget cuts. However, that cannot happen in regards to correctional education. Actually, federal and states, they actually need to invest into these programs. In particular, for example, looking at a federal level, Pell Grants, reinstating Pell Grants to become accessible to those who are incarcerated so that they can be able to access higher education. Keeping in mind that you want to avoid just limiting these grants to those who are close to those who are close to reentry, because given the long-standing racial disparities that we have in sentencing, those who have longer and indeterminate sentences are individuals of color. And so you don't want to have policies that perpetuate inequity in higher education so they can earn these credentials. I like to end my little piece on a quote from one of my students that I met at a correctional facility in California last year. And he said, it's really important for us to have these rehabilitative programs to help us make different choices so that we don't fall back into our old way of doing things when we return back to our communities that we left. Thank you so much.
Monique, that was so helpful. Thank you. Let me ask you a quick question. What's the level of employer engagement when it comes to job training programs behind bars? Are employers engaged? Are they not?
Yeah, and so that's another recommendation in my report, is that you really need this partnership with industry employers in the communities that they'll be released with these job training programs. And because job training within a correctional setting is very vast and it looks very different, it depends on how robust that program is. So some programs are robust and they have those partnerships, and one I went to, they actually had jobs waiting for them because they had those partnerships established. And so I think that's the model that's very, very important to help individuals transfer their credentials and to actually have an adjustment upon release.